Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Kenichi, and welcome to another edition of Valley Sports Rewind. And I'm very excited today because although he's not from the Valley, today's guest had a lot to do with impact in Valley, especially Valley football. He was a tremendous running back at Cheshire High School. He would take his career to another level at the University of Syracuse. We are joined today by Mr. Kyle McIntosh. And Kyle, I want to thank you for coming on today. This is an honor, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Mike, thank you very much for having me on. I'm very excited and humbled to be on your show.
Now, Kyle, I'd be lying to you if I said I was familiar with Cheshire as far as youth sports go. But let me ask you, did you grow up in Cheshire as a young kid?
Yes, I did. Actually started off playing baseball. I actually think I was a much better baseball player than I was football. I actually didn't play football until I was in 7th grade, but in Cheshire,
really?
yeah, they do have very solid youth sports program over there.
Now, let me ask you, did Cheshire have a Pop Warner program, or did you have to go
We sure
somewhere?
did. We were part of the Shoreline Youth Football League over there, so we played teams of Brantford, Madison, Guilford, Clinton. I think Amity was one of the teams that was in the Shoreline Youth Football League.
Now, let me ask you, you mentioned you didn't start playing until 7th grade. When you were a kid, I know when I was a kid, Derby football and Ansonia football, Shelton, Seymour, they were very big with high school football. Cheshire still hadn't quite gotten to that level yet, but let me ask you, was football big in Cheshire when you were a kid?
Football was really big. For me, I'm one of 6 kids, and my oldest brother, Jerry, is actually the one who kind of set the path for us. I grew up, watching Cheshire football Cheshire High School football at a very young age. My older brother, who went on to play football at UConn, was the 2-year captain over there. So, Cheshire football, it was always big over, in our town. However, it took us some time to get the program, to the level that, we did when I played.
Right. Now, let me ask you, were your parents from Cheshire? Did they grow up in Cheshire?
No. So, my parents, they're from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
And, prior to that, we actually lived in Florida.
Really?
Prior to that, yes. So Cheshire, that's where I grew up.
Right. But they weren't from there.
Correct.
Right. And a lot of times, kids who get into, football programs or basketball programs, baseball, their parents a lot of times grew up there, and they kind of tell them the history. So you, your brother Ian, your brother Jerry, you really didn't have the history of Cheshire. You just knew that you lived there and stuff like that.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely. My brother Jerry, I think, only played there for a year.
Right. So let me ask you this. Would you go to games on Saturdays when Cheshire would play?
Absolutely.
So your parents would take you in.
That was definitely the place to be. So I attended most of the high school games on Saturday, back when we played football games on Saturday afternoon. Right.
And, Cheshire was also very big for basketball. Their football program goes without saying, but they were big with basketball. Did you play basketball as a younger kid? Did you play biddy league or anything?
No basketball for me. My younger brother Ian played basketball. I think with myself, I was probably a little too aggressive, to play basketball. But, did attend, the basketball games. But, football was where it was at for us.
Right. So let me ask you, I know you played baseball a lot as a kid. You said you didn't go out till 7th grade.
I was not allowed to. No.
Oh, so your parents.
I'll tell you a story. So my mother, my mother is very much into the arts and culture and stuff like that. So for me, she knew how bad I wanted to play football.
Right.
So the rule was I needed to play 3 instruments before I was allowed to play football.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
So that was a rule in our house, and took a while to find lessons at that time. Because I think in the public schools here that they didn't have any type of instruments that that they taught until you were around 5th grade.
Right.
So I started off playing the accordion, which everybody seems to get a big laugh at, and the saxophone, and then the viola.
Wow.
So I had to learn all that before I was able to get onto the football field.
Now, let me ask you, did you enjoy playing those instruments, or did you do it more out of necessity?
Necessity.
Right.
Necessity. I mean, I did, enjoy the saxophone and the viola a little bit, but it was really more out of necessity. I was dying to get on the football field. My mother knew that.
Right. And, we'll talk a little bit about your brother, Ian, as time goes on, but were you and Ian very competitive with one another as younger kids? You were only a year apart. So, I mean, you two, I don't know if you could find a better brother combination, but you two definitely, I think, brought out the best in each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really more or less where our competition came in, was that we were really just trying to bring out the best in each other instead of, one-upping the other.
Right. And you know what I find interesting? You went to Syracuse, Ian went to Syracuse. But if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, you also had a sister that was a very good basketball player for Cheshire. I believe she was all-state. Am I correct?
Almost. It was track.
Track, right.
Yes.
I knew it was one of them.
Yes,
right.
It was my sister, Krista.
Right. And she was younger than you and Ian, right?
Yes. Yeah. She was, a great runner. So we needed to keep up with our older siblings.
Now, having that many athletes in the family, obviously you had to inherit it from somewhere. Was your father or mother good athletes? I know your mother was into the arts, but was your father a good athlete?
My father was a good football player, but my mother has good genes on her side of the family too. Random fact for you: Ty Law is actually my cousin.
Oh wow!
Yes.
Okay.
His mother and my mother are first cousins.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Yes.
So you mentioned about playing baseball a lot as a kid. Did you say, for instance, 5th or 6th grade, was baseball the sport that you really wanted to concentrate on, or in the back of your mind was football?
It was always football.
Right.
It was always football. I didn't play organized football until I was in 7th grade. But,
right.
I could not wait to get onto the football field. And with baseball, I think I got a little burnt out with that. I mean, I'd been playing baseball since I was in 1st grade.
Right.
Actually, 1st grade with T-ball. And from there, went through the, the youth teams.
Right. Now, were there any people that you kind of idolized as a kid that made you want to be a football player? There were some great running backs when you were a kid. Herschel Walker,
absolutely.
Joe Morris with the Giants was very good.
Tony Dorsett.
Who was phenomenal. So, were there any?
Tony Dorsett was,
right.
Probably the
so were you
one
a Cowboys
running back.
Fan?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Okay.
Cowboys fan and Philadelphia Eagle fan.
Right.
With Tony Dorsett, he was the first running back that I idolized, and first number that I wore in football was 33.
Right. And I'm sure you were heartbroken when they traded him to Denver.
Oh, yeah. It was heartbreaking for sure.
Right. So now let's get into 7th grade, because it's interesting that was your first time playing, because I think Coach Odazio probably came the year before that to Cheshire.
He sure did.
And your first year playing football was also the first year that Cheshire had a tremendous season where they won the Housatonic League. I believe they went 10-0 and got beat in the playoff game.
Yes.
But just talk about, before we get into Coach Odazio and the program, talk about what that first experience was like. Say maybe the first 2 weeks, you're in pads and stuff. Did it take a while to get used to?
Back in 7th grade, yes, it did. Actually, my oldest brother, Jerry, was one of our coaches.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
An assistant coach on our team. But, yeah, it took me a while to get used to. I do remember having several penalties called on myself. Face mask. I was just as raw as it came.
Were you running back right away, or?
Yeah, I really took to that. But on the defensive side of the ball,
right?
Definitely needed a lot of coaching. Form tackle, can't grab guy in his face mask.
Right. How was the hidden part though? Did you get used to that right away?
Absolutely. I was an aggressive, child already. So I just loved the contact.
Right.
There.
And now, did Ian play that year with you too, or did he have to wait?
Ian did play. He was in
6th grade, probably.
Yeah, so
right.
it was.
So you weren't on the same team,
correct?
Right. And what was, one thing I always say, and I sound like a broken record, but I say this anytime I talk to somebody about football. Pop Warner, in a lot of ways, is really what gets you introduced to what football is really going to be about. Because when you get to high school, you can't focus on teaching a kid how to form tackle or teaching them how to hit. That's really where Pop Warner plays the part, and they teach you the basics as well.
Absolutely, and that's where I say, with a lot of the great programs in here, they have great youth programs,
right?
To where they're able to teach those skills early,
right? And what do you think about? There's been a big argument, in the last few years. Some people believe that kids really shouldn't start playing, Pop Warner or AYF till 7th grade. Some kids are playing it, as old as 7 years old. How do you feel about it? Do you think a kid is ready at 7 years old to really play some type of organized football, or do you think they should kind of wait as they get older?
I think they are. I think there are advantages and, some disadvantages to that. I think that the advantages are, as you said, that where they're developing the skills early on and learning, form tackling and, their footwork. They're also, learning the system there. A lot
right.
of these sports, will kind of run a variation of the, high school system there. But the disadvantages are, you are taking a risk of potentially ending your, career before it even gets started. But, that's just the game of football.
Right.
Though, you run that risk, anytime you get on the field.
Right. And now, how would you say you did your first year of football? I know, like you said, you got a lot of penalties, but how would you say you did it carrying the football?
I'd say the first time I touched the ball, I ran 80 yards for a touchdoan.
Oh, wow. Were you
I think
punts too?
Yeah, returning punts
right.
and kickoffs. And I was going through just old clippings, and I think I had like 27 touchdowns when I was in
first year.
Yeah, my first year.
That's a pretty good first year. Usually kids are kind of raw a little bit, and so that's a pretty great year. And who were some of the? Did you have any of the guys that would end up coaching in high school coach at all that year?
No, actually, it was our head coach was Dave Riccio.
Okay,
remember that? My older brother
Jerry, right,
and two other assistant football coaches who wouldn't go on in coach in high school. But 8th grade, my older brother Jerry actually was our head coach.
Oh, really? So
yes.
That had to be interesting.
Yes, that was. Well, you know what? It was. If I'm not mistaken, Ian was on my team that year.
Right.
And then actually both of my older brothers were coaches. Jerry is the head coach and Terrence is the assistant coach.
Oh, wow.
And it was brutal. They were tougher on me and Ian than they were
on the other
kids.
Right.
And
did
it was tough.
Hating them
yes,
sometimes?
I certainly did. I certainly did. One incident I'll never forget. It's my older brother Terrence had like this old beat up Chevette, and it broke down on our way to practice. So, we were, I think, like 15 minutes late to practice, and my older brother Jerry's rule was if you were late to practice, you had to run.
Right.
At the end of practice. So, we get there. We had a legitimate excuse. Car broke down.
Right.
We still had to run after practice, and I was pissed off at my brother, so I'm taking my time. They shut the lights out off the field, and I'm still running laps.
And nothing you did wrong either. It's
just that's just how it was. So, and I learned to appreciate that
right.
later on.
And
those lessons later on.
I mentioned Cheshire that year. You could really start to see that this program was going to take off with Coach Steve Adazio. I think it was his second year, and they took the Hoosie. I think one of the big things for Cheshire that year too is they got over that hump against Derby, because for the longest time they had trouble beating teams like Derby, Seymour. But that second game of the year, they beat Derby. I believe it was 15-10 in a rainy night. And I really believe that, Derby was a premier team back then. And when Cheshire
absolutely.
beat them, you could see that, the tide was changing a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think it was, 2 years later when I played, that I had a really good understanding of just the rivalry between Cheshire and Derby. They were a tough team. I think my freshman year.
Right, I think it was an 8-7.
Yeah,
in the rain.
8-7 game.
Yeah.
I will never ever forget that game.
Right.
Very exciting game, and I just remember preparing for that week and Coach Adazio and his words, and
right.
and just what an important game that was for us.
Now, before you got to high school, did you ever meet Coach Adazio previously? I mean, did he ever come up to the practices at all?
Yeah, he did. He did come up to
he was a
the
young
practices.
guy too, so I think
he was
in a lot of ways that helped Cheshire too, because you had a young guy in there who's still not a kid, but he definitely could relate to you guys a little more. And
he could relate. The thing is, he ran that high school program like a college program.
Right. Yeah, he definitely did. You could just see from that second year he was going to do great things. So 8th grade year, you had, like you said, a good year. You guys did very well. You enter 9th grade now, and most kids don't play on the varsity in 9th grade. They play freshman football.
Correct.
Maybe one or two kids might play JV. But freshman year, you basically were returning punts, and you were in the backfield a lot. Talk about going into your freshman year, what that was like.
Yeah, going into my freshman year, it was pretty intimidating. I got the call, to come up to the varsity practices. I think when we went to the Syracuse football camp, and Coach Adazio saw how I performed at the camp there, and then as we were going into preseason, he mentioned that he wanted me to come up with the varsity team. But that was one of the most difficult time periods for me, as I had not quite been exposed to the work ethic that was involved there. I mean, we were doing triple sessions at that time.
Yeah.
I'm used to practicing, twice a week in junior football.
Yeah.
And now we're, have triple sessions for a week, and then they went down to, I think it was triple sessions for 3 or 4 days, and then, double sessions for another 3.
Right.
So that was tough. I mean, to the point where I, didn't know football was quite for me at that time.
So you had that little doubt.
Yes, but there was no option for quitting. That was a family rule. Once you committed to something, you had to see it the whole way through.
You were in all the way.
Yes, you had to see it the whole way through. And, it was probably one of the best decisions that I made. But it was intense, and we actually had a very good team. Probably, I would say my 4 years at Cheshire, that was probably the biggest and most athletic team that we had at Cheshire. And it was a little bit of a disappointment as to how our season turned out that year.
Right.
I mean, our offensive line was
I think
huge.
you guys, like I said, started off maybe 4-0, and then you took a loss to Hamden. And
correct.
Started
out. We actually the first game of the year.
Actually, yeah.
First game of the year was actually a tie with Naugatuck.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's a game that I'll actually never forget, because the first time I touched the ball there was actually a punt return. I returned that for a touchdown, like 65-yard touchdown. So that's a game that I'll never.
Right. It had to be
forget.
a good feeling as a young kid, because you know what? You're a young kid, you're 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
You want to win, but at the same time, when you score a varsity touchdown like that, I mean, you have to be on cloud nine.
Oh, absolutely. That's a moment in my life that I'll never forget. I remember the play, very well, who was on the field, what it was like, scoring the first time I touched the ball.
Exactly. And you talked about the triple sessions and how hard Coach Adazio worked you guys. Like I said, again, a 14, 15-year-old kid, you don't sometimes appreciate what coaches do until you get older. Then you really kind of appreciate it. Did you like Coach Adazio right from the start, or did you think he was a pain?
It's not that I thought he was a pain. I was scared of him.
Right.
Everybody was scared of him. I mean, he was a tough coach. He was a tough coach. But the thing is, what I appreciate is tough as he was on you, and as tough as he worked you, was as much as he loved you.
Right.
And guys knew that.
Right. Exactly.
And then they just had a great respect for Coach Adazio, and he's like a second father.
Right.
To me.
What was interesting about him, too? He was one of the few coaches, maybe the only coach I ever saw do this, before games when you guys would, be doing like warm-ups in Team D. He would quarterback the scout offense, and he would run the option plays and stuff, and I had never saw a coach do that. And, he was kind of hands-on, too. Which
Very much.
Right. And I believe Coach Ecke was there as well with that staff. Just
Correct.
Tremendous coaching.
Mars Petrosio.
Yes, yep. And they had tremendous coaching, and you could just really see that program was, going to take off. I think another game that really stands out to me your freshman year was against Seymour as well. I think you did return a couple for touchdowns. At least one, I think you returned a kickoff or a punt.
Yes, it was a it was a kickoff my freshman year.
Right.
It was.
And, Seymour had a tremendous program.
They did. They're tough.
Very well coached. And, there was a little rivalry between Coach Sponheimer and Coach Adazio, a little, gamemanship and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about where I really believe the coming out party for Kyle McIntosh was. It was against Derby. We mentioned it briefly, but you guys went into that game 3-0-1. Derby was 3-1, and they had just lost their quarterback, Ben Bartone.
Yes.
On paper, it looked like you guys were going to roll them. But, the weather was horrible that night. It was pouring out. How the game got played, I'll never know. But it was a battle, and you guys were down 7-0 most of the game. And then I believe you broke one for maybe 35 yards and got them in the end zone.
Correct.
And you guys went for the 2-point conversion. That was gutsy on Coach Adazio's part.
It was he knew he had to go for two. And we were actually all shocked that we were going for two. After that touchdown when we ran to the sideline, he came back. He said, "We're going for two. We're going for two." And everybody just looked at each other like, "Are you serious?"
Right. But that was the type of game for you where you didn't. Derby was holding you guys all game, but you found a way to get yourself in that end zone. And I think in a lot of ways, maybe you didn't have a lot of yards that game, but it was a big game as far as for your confidence because you were able to be a big contributor on a hard-fought game.
Absolutely, and in a game that we were told was going to be one of the biggest games of our season, and just happened to be that.
Right.
It was certainly a breakout. I feel for myself in terms of knowing that I was able to make an impact. We had a solid senior team.
Right.
With Alex Horton and Don Bonalio in the backfield,
kind of like big brothers.
Yeah, they certainly were and still are.
Right. Definitely good players. Let me ask you this. I'm going to talk about North Haven in a second, but would you say Derby or Shelton, even though you guys weren't next to each other, would you say those were the big games for Coach Adazio? Did he look at Derby as your rivalry?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Derby, Shelton, Seymour. I mean, those games were, games that, I'll never forget the practices that we had where it was just, we would, rep all of our plays. And as you mentioned, Coach Adazio was very hands-on. To where, he would quarterback, the scout team because he wanted the timing to be perfect.
Right.
He wanted, quarterbacks to make the right decision every single time. And anytime he didn't do it, he just did it again, over and over again.
Right. I wanted to bring up North Haven because I think your junior year was the last year you guys played North Haven as far as Thanksgiving went. And I really thought that was a good rivalry, and it was a shame it ended. Let me ask you, were you disappointed when they did away with that game?
I was, and actually we did play North Haven my senior year, and I think that was the last year that we played.
Yes, you're right. And then they went to Southern.
Yes,
right.
Then they went to Southington.
Right.
That was a rivalry that, I don't know if it's because I'm, biased because that's what I came into. But, that was really a great rivalry with North Haven. And, a lot of the guys who played for North Haven, I'm still very close with. Jeff DeLucia is one of my closest friends.
Right. Good player.
Over there. But, it was very disappointing. And going to the games, it still is a little bit.
Right. Yeah, it definitely was a great rivalry. I was sorry to see it go. Now, you get into your sophomore year. Let me ask you, in that off season, you kind of knew you were going to be the guy now. You were getting a lot of playing time freshman year, but now you're not coming off the field.
Correct.
You're going to be on the field. How nervous were you going into your sophomore season? Because there were a lot of big things predicted for that team.
Yeah, I'd say that, I was a little bit nervous, but I was more excited to take on the challenge. Knowing what we were capable of doing, and just the work that we put in the off season. It was relentless.
Right, which is a credit to the coach and staff.
Absolutely. We were in the weight room. You were in the weight room 5 days a week.
Right.
And you did not. Coach Adazio was in the weight room every single day.
Right. So you couldn't slack off.
No. Nor could you miss a workout.
Right. That's how it should be. You
absolutely.
Really should. So let's talk about sophomore year. Obviously a magical season, but that year, a lot of hard-fought victories. Sheehan was very good that year.
Yes, they were.
Shelton didn't have a great game. Shelton didn't have a great record, but Shelton's never easy. And I looked again. Another game that stands out to me is the Derby game, because you guys are 2-0 going into Derby at Ryan Field. Yeah. Derby's 1-1. It looks like again Derby had just lost an overtime game to Sheehan. It looks like Derby's just going to roll over, but the heart of that Derby team played so hard that night. That was a hard-fought game. And again,
they did.
You got another big run towards the end of the game that kind of sealed it.
Correct. And, Derby was a team that was just, always tough.
Right.
They beat you up.
Right. And they had a great player in David Ann Roman.
Absolutely. And, who comes from a family of football players. Because, there were a few Ann Romans.
Right.
That
David
played,
and John.
Yeah. Yes, because my oldest brother, Jerry, played against Ann Roman. Yes.
Yeah. And so, it was a hard-fought victory. You guys really sealed it towards the end. You win 15-6. But it felt like after that game, you guys had the confidence. Even though you didn't kill them, after that, you guys weren't going to be denied, because you guys just started exploding after that.
Yeah, after that game, absolutely. And, I think that's where we really saw what we were made of. Because, Derby was relentless. Those guys just came back and just never quit. And, they play smash mouth football. They'll come and hit you right in the mouth.
Right.
And that's exactly what they did. And, after that game, we were beat up, but, that's really when we kind of had an idea as what we were capable of doing.
Right. And, your brother Ian would also play on the varsity that year as a freshman. So just talk about that. Your parents, they're proud of you no matter what, but they had to be very proud to have two sons playing varsity on, as freshmen. That's tremendous. Talk a little bit about, you and Ian, just as brothers, and the bond you two have.
It's a significant bond. And, the high school football games ended up becoming just a family event.
Right.
To where all of my siblings were there, my, nieces and, then aunts and uncles and cousins would come to the game, and it really ended up becoming a family event every Friday.
Right.
To where my family literally had their own section in the stands. There were so many family members that would attend our games, and me and Ian, we had a great bond, extremely strong bond. And the thing is, we knew that. Not only were we representing our town and the program when we took the field, but we were also representing our family, and we didn't want to let them down. So we knew that we had to come out and perform, not just every game, but every single play.
Right. And, one of the things that was great about Ian is he's a great running back, but he knew with you being there, he was going to have to be more receiver. And, he would return kicks and stuff like that. And he accepted the role great. And he was a very good defensive player, too. That kind of gets unrecognized sometimes, because
he was a great defensive player.
He was so good on offense. But defensively, you could not get open on him.
Ian was a great defensive player. And, I'll go back and watch some of our highlight films occasionally. And, really probably my junior and senior year, to see him on the defensive side of the ball, some of the interceptions that he made, and the way he was able to lock receivers down, I was, always impressed. And, on the offensive side of the ball, some of the catches that, he made. I don't know if you remember, I think it was my sophomore season, Ian as a true freshman, when we played Brantford.
Yes.
And he made an unbelievable diving catch.
Right.
To put us in position, to score.
Right, and Brantford was tough that year as well. Physical team.
We were in double overtime.
Right,
with that. So, just going back to what you said, my sophomore year, just, as a program, was really just a defining moment for our program. We played in some very close games. The Derby game,
Sheehan was tough.
The Sheehan game was tough. Brantford was tough. Lyman Hall
Lyman Hall's always tough.
We won that
sometimes.
game.
Yeah.
I think in the last minutes of that game, and that's prior to that game, most of their key players were out hurt, and they all happened to return when we played them, and we barely won that game.
Right.
My sophomore year season was definitely a defining moment for our program.
Right, and talk about the state championship game that year. You had to get over that hump of getting that state title for Cheshire. Just talk about what that feeling was like for you.
It was a great feeling, for us and our program and what we would go on to do. It was a little painful for me because I actually didn't play that game.
Right,
I got hurt. I tore my MCL, like second-degree tear in my MCL. And that's where Ian came to step in for me as a running back. Actually, it was the North Haven game is where I got hurt, and Ian stepped in and came up big for us in that game, but then really came up big for us in the state championship game. So it was tough to have a season like that
and not be able to play
in the state championship game. It did. It really did. And then going into my junior year, I mean, that was just a huge focus of mine is to to get back to that state championship game and be able to play. But as far as our program, because that's what was most important, and over time, I came to realize that it's more important what we did as a program than me as an individual contributor not being able to contribute. But it's what we did as a program, what we would go on to do. That was most important for me.
Right, and that same year you make All-State, and as a sophomore, that's a heck of an accomplishment. I don't care how gifted and talented you are. It's still hard to do as a sophomore. What was that feeling like when Coach Adazio told you you'd made All-State?
It was a great feeling. Gave me an idea as to what I was capable of doing, and I think opened my eyes as to what my future might hold if I continue to build upon that.
Right.
And that's where I think my mentality change in terms of wanting to be the best player at my position in the state.
Right. So let's talk about your junior and senior year. Those were tremendous runs by Cheshire. I mean, the sophomore year, getting over the hump was tremendous. You had a lot of tough games. Very seldom your junior and senior year did you guys have a game that you really had to fight to win. You guys just made it look so easy. Just talk about those great teams and some of the great players on those teams.
Yeah, it was our attitude. Guys on our team were hungry. We never got complacent. Coach Adazio would never let us get complacent. It was our motto was one down, one to go.
Right.
Once we finished that game on Friday night, it was done and over with. You didn't think about it. You didn't think about the statistics of the game, how well you played.
Right.
We went into film on Sunday where I don't care how well we played. Coach Adazio would find, the smallest mistakes to point out, and we would work on it. We never played a perfect game. He let us know that he was proud of us, but we could do much better.
Much better, right.
Much better. And, what the upcoming challenge was going to be for us. And, one, we were terrified of making mistakes in the game because it would always be pointed out in film on Sundays, and it didn't.
Right.
So we were terrified of making mistakes. And I think that's what made us exceptional. We had a bunch of hungry guys out there, but, we were a very, very fundamentally sound team who, executed, almost to perfection. And I say that because, we would, as I mentioned earlier, just, rep, the plays over and over and over again until we were perfect at it. Our execution was, I think, our advantage.
Right. And, the thing is, in practice, you're just saying to yourself, God, why does he keep running the same play over and over again? But then you watch the game, and you guys are running it perfect. So there's an idea to everything he was doing. There's
Correct.
definitely an end to it.
Into
Right.
means absolutely. Right. And I'd also have to say that my junior, especially my senior year, every time we got on the field, we weren't always the best team as far as athletically
Right.
to walk on the field. The thing is that we executed perfectly, and when there was an opportunity to make a play, we made the play.
Right. And the thing of it is you had so many guys that could step up. Maybe they might be able to stop you on a couple downs, but then you got to worry about the other guys on that team that could always step up. Guys like Steve Bowman and Steve Bain, guys like that.
Yes.
So many guys on those teams that, guess what? If you could stop one, you had to stop the other. You had to stop Ian sometimes.
Absolutely.
There was never a night off. And then, you had a great line. The line was tremendous.
It certainly was. As you said, we had several weapons. So if you wanted to focus on, let's say stopping the run.
Right.
Well, then we, throw it to the air. And, our receivers would make plays. Or quarterback, we'd get it to them. Then you had our defense, which was tremendous. And even watching film now, I still love watching that defense because they were relentless. It was 11 hats to the ball. And if you ever get a chance to see, some of those games from my junior and senior year, it is unbelievable just to see those guys on defense just get after the ball, wherever it was. In the air, on the ground, they got after it.
Right. Let me ask you, when you're trying to win championships and you're trying to week in and week out get wins, do you enjoy it, or is it hard to enjoy it in the moment? You enjoy it more after the season?
Yeah, you definitely enjoy it more after the season. It's really tough to enjoy it in the moment, and I don't know if it's because of the coaches that we had. You never had time to really enjoy it because once that game was over, you were really focused on the next week, and that game, meant nothing at that time.
Right.
It was, you had a battle won that's done and over with. It's, what is our, our game this week?
Right.
That was our primary focus, and that's all that mattered.
Right. And, your senior year, the Housatonic, they did away with the Hoosie. I was very upset about that.
It was disappointing. Yes.
They went to the SCC. And, so you didn't get to play. I know you mentioned you played North Haven, but I do know that Brantford said goodbye to the Hoosie, or at least that part of the Hoosie.
Correct.
Seymour went to the MVL. So you lost so many teams and so many rivalries. It just kind of put a damper on things. What did you think about the SCC at that time?
At that time, I, just it was a little disappointing, to be honest. Those are great rivalries and traditions that, that had gone on for years. It developed a lot of great players, a lot of great, memories. And, for me, it was disappointing. Those were hard fought games. Those were games that you would look forward to, every year.
Right.
And, once they did away with that, it was disappointing, because the Housatonic, I think, was an exceptional league. I don't think that there was a tougher league in the state that could compete with Housatonic football.
Right. Your senior year, Kyle, another team very close to Derby, right next to them, was having a tremendous year. And there was always a lot of talk those two teams should play each other. Let me ask you, I know you probably heard of Ansonia, but did you know how big their program was when you were playing?
Yes, I did. And, probably my junior year was really when, I got a sense as to how big their program was, their tradition was. Even though they were, I think a double S school. A school.
I think double S your senior year, but S your junior year.
Yes. Right. You just go back and look at their record and how many times they appeared in state championship games. The undefeated seasons that they had, and that's kind of when I had an idea that they were definitely a powerhouse.
Right. Did you wish you would have got to play them once?
I do, for the simple fact that I think it would have just quieted everybody down, just because there was so much talk,
right? Who was better
in the state?
Right.
As to who was better. There was one point that they were trying to make that game happen, like just a game, and that's probably the only reason why I would have wanted to play Antonio, is to kind of quiet the critics,
right?
But they were a great team in a great program.
Right, and they had good players. Ron Tate, Stephen Faulkner.
They certainly did. But still, kind of going back and looking at the film, watching us play, any team would almost have to play a flawless game to beat us. And like I said, it's just because we executed so well.
Right. Definitely. I mean, it was a tremendous team. So your senior year comes to an end. You guys win another state title. You walk out of your Cheshire career with 3 state championships, 3-time All-State, and player of the state in the register. Talk about could you have asked for a better high school career?
No, I could not. There was no better ending, to my career than to, be able to go out a state champion and to be recognized, to the registers, state player of the year. But for me, it was always about the program. It was never what I would accomplish as an individual.
But you guys put Cheshire on the map. I mean, all of you guys really did.
Yeah.
You made it a program.
Yeah, absolutely. We all contributed to the success of that program, and it was for me. It was about what we accomplished as a team. I mean, that was really what would stand the test of time. Was almost broken 2 or 3 years ago, but
still by one game.
Still continues to stand the test.
Right. So you move over to Syracuse. Number one, were you obviously you were nervous, but Coach Adazio came with you.
Yeah,
which
he
I
sure
think
did.
It helped. He became the tight ends coach.
Yes.
What was that like?
It was great. At first, I was like, oh no, I have 4 more years, because I knew that he wouldn't, take it easy on me now that I was going to college. I'm just like, oh boy, I have 4 more years of, Coach Adazio, as tough as he was, but it was probably one of the best things that could have happened. He was there for me when I went through tough times. I went through another tough time when I went to Syracuse, and going through preseason there.
Yeah, I remember there was an article, and he kind of took you aside, and he said you got to grow up.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to quit.
Right. Because it's a different level, because what it is. All these guys are just as good as you.
Correct.
And the other thing is you have to fight for your spot. I mean, you could have a great sophomore year.
Every day,
year, if they recruit somebody, that
you
guy
fight for your
could
spot. You fight for your spot every single day. The guys that backed me up, and even the guys that I played in front of. I wanted to get on the field. I wanted to stay on the field.
Right.
And so did everybody else. Right. So it was there was no time to slack off or to take a play off, because the moment you did, is when somebody else would step up, and you just never know when that time would be. So, you had to bring your A game to practice, every single practice.
Right. And think about some of the players you played with. Donavan McNabb, who, he was a great college quarterback. He became a great NFL quarterback. He really did with the Eagles. He was tremendous. He played a little bit with Washington. David Tyree, who maybe wasn't a superstar in the NFL, but guess what? He made one of the biggest catches
ever
in NFL history. Marvin Harrison. Tabucky Jones, who was from Connecticut, I believe, right?
From New Britain. And as a matter of fact, I actually had introduced him. Congresswoman Elizabeth Esty presents an award. It's called Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, and during Black History Month, and individuals who made a huge contribution to their community, and I was actually asked to introduce to Bucky about a month ago.
Great honor.
So it was great to see him.
Right, and I mean, you played for Coach Paul Pasqualoni, and towards the end of his career, he was getting criticized a lot. I didn't think it was fair. He did very well with that program, won a couple Big East titles. I think you got a Big East title in there.
Three,
yeah.
Yes, 1996, it was actually a three-way tie between us, Miami, and Virginia Tech.
Right, and then
Miami was on probation. Virginia Tech beat us head-to-head, so they went to the Alliance Bowl.
Right.
My junior year, we won it outright and went and played in the Fiesta Bowl against Kansas State. And then my senior year, we won it outright again and played against Florida in the Orange Bowl.
Right, and I mean, he was a tremendous coach. I really think, to me, I don't know if there was a better coach at Syracuse than him. I think he was their best ever. He really was.
Yes. Him, Coach McPherson, prior to him was actually a great coach. But Coach Pasqualoni, really was turning that program into a national powerhouse consistently.
Right. And it hasn't really done well since it's done okay, but not great.
Not to the level.
Left.
No.
Right.
Not from a recruiting perspective or, performance, to be honest with you, on a consistent, basis. They're trying to do some great things over there, but, nothing was like the time that, the run that I had, over there to where we, we're turning to a national powerhouse. Losing to my senior year, losing to Tennessee by 2 points, the last second field goal, where Tennessee went on to win the national championship game, and then come back and beat Michigan the week after.
Right.
It was unfortunate to see Coach P go, especially the way he was let go, because he was fired coming off I don't know if it was a 6-4 season or 7-3 season.
It definitely wasn't.
But they were, went to a bowl game.
Yeah. What happened
after
too
that,
is these fans got spoiled and they started turning on him
exactly.
a little bit, which, until you play the game, you don't understand what the guy does.
Correct.
And I thought that was.
And then Jake Krauthamel, our athletic director, had retired, and then you had Daryl Gross, who just come in, and he's the one who made that decision as soon as it comes in.
Yeah.
So there's me personally, I had a little resentment towards that just because of knowing Coach Pasqualoni and his background, and also maybe a little bias from him coming from Cheshire, as well. But it was unfortunate.
Right. Kyle, it's amazing to think that we've talked an hour already. Time goes by. But at some point, we'll have to have you back on and talk more about Syracuse. But I really do applaud you and what you've done with your career. And I've always said this many times. To this day, whenever I hear about Cheshire football, whenever I see how they're doing, I still think of Kyle McIntosh. To me, tremendous players. But, there's guys, Mickey Mantle's known for the Yankees. There's different guys that kind of represent that team. And to me, you represent Cheshire. It always starts with your name first. And congratulations on a great high school career and collegiate career.
Mike, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. And, once again, just very honored that you asked me to come on your show. It's been a great time. You're absolutely right. I can't believe an hour has passed already. It seems like we're just getting started.
Right. And I really do appreciate you coming on today. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
And that was legendary Cheshire running back and Syracuse running back Kyle McIntosh. For Valley Sports Rewind, I'm Mike Kenichi saying goodbye, everyone.